Good morning. It is Friday, May the 28th, 2021. And as they've been saying since the 1970s, thank God it's Friday. Today, let it be known, we have the president of the NAACP, the oldest civil rights organization and perhaps the most recognizable civil rights organization around the globe. Derrick Johnson will join us this morning. Of course, let's bring on our president and CEO, who actually is the former NAACP president, Dr. Ben Chavis. Good morning, Dr. Chavis.
Good morning, Stacy. On behalf of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, our 230 African American owned newspapers and media companies across the country, Karen Carter Richards, our distinguished chair of the NNPA, and as well as all of our executive committee, we greet everybody on this edition of Let It Be Known. It's Friday, but right before we went on air, we said we have to fight for freedom every day, every hour. I'm honored that we have the president and CEO of the the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, with us this morning. I've known him for many years and great leadership. And even before we get into his interview, I want to make sure all of our listeners, all of our viewers, all of you should be members of the NAACP. The NAACP needs your membership, needs your support. And we in the Black press, we're going to talk about our strategic alliance between the NAACP and the NNPA. But, let's get to the headlines so we can get to President Johnson.
Absolutely. The Senate confirmed Shakita Brooks LaSure to head the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. The 55 to 44 vote makes her the first Black woman to lead CMS in its near 6-decade history. The agency oversees Medicare, Medicaid, and the Children's Health Insurance Program known as CHIP. Shakita said, during my career, I've seen how communities of color too often experience worse health outcomes, which we've seen so acutely during this pandemic. Ironically, we're going to talk to President Derrick Johnson more about what the NAACP is doing along those lines as well. But congratulations to Shakita Brooks LaSure. Dr. Chavis, another promise of the Biden-Harris campaign was to make sure that the administration and those who serve in any capacity at the White House, that there was a wide diversity, and that Black women would certainly be key to that.
Oh, absolutely. Well, diversity, equity, and inclusion is more than a rhetorical term. And so far, the Biden-Harris administration, they're striving to keep the promises made to African Americans and other communities of color last year during the election. Elections have consequences. We saw the devastation of the prior administration. Now we're seeing the repair that is undergoing by the current administration. So, but we got to keep pushing, and we celebrate these appointments, these developments. We also had, Christian Clark over the Justice Department, Civil Rights Division, another dynamic Black woman. So yes, we're making strides every day.
Yeah, we also saw Corinne Jean-Pierre, the principal deputy press secretary for the White House, become just the second Black woman in history and the first openly gay individual to lead an official White House briefing this week. So we're seeing a lot of action, putting action to the words by the Biden-Harris administration. Dr. Chavis also, we talk about politics. Gladys Sicknick, the mother of fallen U.S. Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick, said that she is hopeful her meeting with GOP senators today will change their minds on whether to vote for a January 6th commission. Sicknick is meeting with more than a dozen members of the Senate ahead of their vote on whether to set up a commission to investigate what actually happened on January 6th. Only 3 Republican senators Mitt Romney of Utah, Susan Collins of Maine, and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, have expressed their support for advancing the legislation. Democrats do need at least 10 Republicans to join them to get this measure passed. So we're seeing even the wife of the victim of the January 6th insurrection, she's speaking out, trying to get these Republicans to get on board.
Well, again, the question should be asked, why are so many Republicans in the Senate opposed to it. What are they trying to hide? I mean, a commission seeks truth, seeks facts. I remember the Kerner Commission back in the 1960s found what they found back then turned out to be true even today in 2021. So, we'll see what happens. But I think the Democrats at some point are going to have to do away with the filibuster, because the filibuster rule right now is not in the interest of communities of color. It's not in the interest of civil rights. It's not in the interest of being progressive and trying to repair some of the damage of the prior administration.
Yeah, and speaking of the filibuster, the one Democrat, actually, there's a couple of Democrats who kind of oppose the filibuster, but the one main opposition on the Democratic side is Joe Manchin of West Virginia. However, Manchin yesterday was furious that the Republicans are holding up this January 6th commission. So who knows? Maybe Dr. Chavis, Joe Manchin, will start to change his mind on that and make it easier for Democrats to rid the Senate of this, like you said, this really racist and oppressive filibuster.
Well, that's why I'm so glad that President Derrick Johnson is going to be with us this morning, because really, if we want to change what's going on in Washington, D.C., we have to change what's going on in our local communities. We have to change what's going on at the state legislatures. We have to change what's going on in every block of every community. We need to be organizing for civil rights, organizing for voting rights, organizing for healthcare rights. And that's why the NAACP is so important.
Yeah. And bad news for sports reporters, those who cover tennis anyway. Superstar Naomi Osaka says she's taking a break from speaking to reporters at the French Open. But there's a reason she's doing it. She says it's time for the media to focus on the mental well-being of athletes. The 23-year-old and number 2 ranked player in the world, she wrote an emotional letter explaining her decision to go silent. She says, I've often felt that people have no regard for athletes' mental health. And this rings very true whenever I see a press conference or partake in one. We're often sat there and asked multiple times before or after. She says we ask questions that bring doubt into our minds, and I'm just not going to subject myself to people that doubt me. She added, I've watched many clips of athletes breaking down after a loss in the press room, and I know you have as well. I believe that whole situation is kicking a person while they are down, and I don't understand the reasoning behind it. So Naomi Osaka, she is taking a stand, Dr. Chavis, when it comes to mental health. And we know, especially in communities of color, this is an issue that needs to be addressed.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And we support her decision. Remember, we represent the Black press of America. And the difference between the Black press and the mainstream press in the United States and also globally is that we care about our communities. We're not hostile to the truth. And a lot of times the mainstream press asks questions, dig in people's personal lives, mental health, always trying to tear people down. In the Black press, we try to lift our community up. Even though we have to report the hard truth, the hard facts, we do it in a way that does not destroy communities, does not destroy careers. And I think our sister made the right decision, and we definitely, from the Black press, support her decision.
You absolutely. Want to say good morning to Joni King and James Wright, Lynn Spivey, Annette Phillips, future guest Cheryl Smith of the Texas Metro News and iMessenger Media. We appreciate you, Cheryl. Nicole McDaniel is watching. Tish Brazil is watching, and our fabulous NPA. I was going to say NAACP. I'm not trying to give her away. Our executive administrator, Claudette Perry, and Bobby Henry is also watching this morning. But we also want to say good morning to our special guests. The NAACP, the nation's largest and most preeminent civil rights organization, is seeking to ensure that our communities continue to stay informed and get the facts they need to make the best decisions for their families and communities when it comes to COVID and everything else. Good morning to Derrick Johnson, President Derrick Johnson.
Good morning. How are you doing this morning, Dr. Chavis? Good to see you as always.
Thank you. It's always good to see you, Mr. President, and greetings to you and the NAACP from the Black press of America. I know you're in Mississippi, you're up early, but you're always up early on the case on behalf of civil rights and improving the quality of life of not only people of African descent, but all people. And NAACP is so important, Mr. President. Tell us what some of the priorities of the NAACP, what your priorities are today as we face the intransigence in the Congress of the United States, the vote of George Floyd, Police and Justice Act, the Voting Rights Act for John Lewis, the Reparations Act. There's so many things pending. Tell us what the NAACP is doing to help mobilize, as we mentioned earlier in the program, at these grassroots levels so we can change Washington.
Well, all that you mentioned, the issues confronting the African-American community is multifaceted. And unfortunately, we don't have the luxury as an organization like the NAACP to zero in on one. We have to take on a strategy to address all of them. We were happy to see Christian Clark confirmed as head of Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department. That should help tremendously with some of the voting rights issues that we are seeing bubbling up across the country. We felt like we were playing whack-a-mole with filing a lawsuit here, filing a lawsuit there. So having someone like her in place would help. Secondly, coming out of this pandemic is going to be crucial. We've launched a campaign so people can understand their options. Just because there's a vaccine, we can't just let our guards down because there are other issues with the virus that is kind of mutating. And so we're telling people to continue to be socially distanced, wear masks where you need to wear masks, and understand the options of the vaccine. We don't tell people to take the vaccine, but get educated about, the pros and cons. But we're going to get out of this circumstance as well. As you look at Police Reform Act, I was just on Congress on this week with Congresswoman Karen Bass, who's done a tremendous job of keeping this issue of police reform front and center, along with Senator Booker. That's a high priority. We've been saying for decades, Black folks were being killed in the streets by police. Emmett Till showed that people were not being held accountable because law enforcement officers were involved there. Rodney King put on tape what we had always been saying. And now with George Floyd, it's time for us to do something about it. That's a damn shame. It's over 60 years that I just recounted, but it's been longer than that. And so we have multiple priorities as we continue to fight for the liberation of our communities.
And President Johnson, I have read an alarming report in the Washington Informer just yesterday. 8 in 10 African Americans in D.C. are dying from the from the coronavirus. What more can be done, or what more are you advocating be done?
Well, people understanding their options now that there is a vaccine, being educated to determine, is that the right thing for you? As we see the moment progress, as more people get the vaccines, we're seeing the rate of impact go down. Now, it doesn't say that you take a vaccine, you won't get COVID. What it is saying is, because of the vaccine, we're seeing less hospitalization, we're seeing less death. That's important. And so as people consider their options, know what you're putting yourself in front of. But, making sure you practice safety with COVID is about you, but it's about your loved ones. Most of our households are multi-generational households. So you want to put someone in your home at risk because they are health compromised. It's about our communities. So you want to put someone in your community at risk because they are health compromised. And so it's really important not to get caught up in the conspiracy theories and begin to weigh what we are beginning to see right now with the lowering of the rate of contraction and hospitalization.
Yeah, and that number, by the way, is Washington, D.C. We're not talking nationwide or globally. 8 in 10 Blacks in Washington, D.C. who have the virus have died. I believe it's the month of May that they have those stats. President Johnson, I know that you guys have an initiative. The NAACP has an initiative called COVID No More. Could you tell our audience a little bit more about that initiative?
Well, the goal here is being the validator in our community, the honest message broker that people can trust. And that's why we don't tell people what to do. We're saying, here are the options and here are the consequences. We should remain socially distanced. And I know many of us want to get back to church service. But even when we get back to church service, we can't sit on top of each other like we used to. I know many of us are tired of wearing the mask. In fact, I get so sick of it because it make my face sweat. But there are some scenarios that we must put the mask on when we're around a lot of people. and there is a vaccine. And so let's get educated about the pros, the cons, and the consequences of taking or not taking the vaccine. That's what the campaign is about. And as we get more information, as more research-based, factual-based information become available, we're going to continue to populate our website so people can understand the facts. Facts matters to Black folks. Now, facts may not matter to other folks, but for our community, facts matter. So let's stick with the facts.
Yeah. That's a great segue, President Johnson. You know, the Black press, we the trusted voice of Black America. The NAACP is the trusted civil rights organization fighting for our rights. And I'm really very proud that several years ago, we, under your leadership, President Johnson, we announced a strategic alliance between the NAACP and the NMPA. And we want to continue to work very close with you. I know because of the virus, your national convention is going to be virtual this year. Our national convention is going to be virtual. Can you tell us about your national convention and tell us how people can participate in your convention virtually?
Absolutely. A convention in July, second week of July, as it is every year. You can go on our website, naacp.org, get more information about it. We are building up the lineup as we speak. We're anxious to get back in person, but we recognize based on our membership's demographics, we don't want to put our people at risk. So we're going to take the extra precautionary measure of having a virtual convention this year as we continue to evaluate when we're going to go back to full in-person participation. But we look forward to all of you joining us. We hope to have informative conversations around topics that's important to our community across the country.
Very good.
Yeah, fantastic. Dr. Al Anubia, I want to say good morning to you. He's watching, or Dr. Al Anubia is watching on YouTube. David Youngblood is watching, and Shanae Brown is watching. President Johnson, we see so much going on. We talked earlier about Christian Clark being confirmed to that post in the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. How important, can you expand on the importance of this administration putting not just people of color in these positions, but Black women? The president said that he owes his presidency to Black women. Talk about the importance of these posts being filled by Black women.
Absolutely critical that competent, qualified people are filling these positions. And for so long, the qualifications of Black people and Black women specifically have been overlooked. Now we are getting some of the best of the best to fill positions that they earned. They earned because of their qualifications, but more importantly, for this president and this political party, they earned because they leveraged their currency, their vote, to make the reality that we see today. We all began to breathe a sigh of relief after the election. We began to breathe a sigh of relief after inauguration because we start seeing former Secretary Marcia Fudge sitting in a seat that we know she's going to be a strong advocate and a good steward of. We felt good to see Christian Clark this week to get confirmed. These are important milestones, not because they're the first African-American or first African-American female in a position, good milestones because we have competent, qualified people with the tenacity to advocate and fight for the communities they come from and be good stewards to make us all proud.
Yeah, and absolutely. And we see Cedric Richmond with a very, very important post at the White House, totally different from the previous administration. Talk about how that makes it a little bit easier. I mean, your job is never easy, but a little bit easier for the NAACP when you do have someone leading the nation who is going to at least give you a listening ear, which you didn't really get in the last administration.
Well, the last administration was filled with white supremacists. And so there are no ears that could hear anything that we could say, nor there was no words that I was going to deliver to change the mind of a white supremacist. And that's just the bottom line. Whether it was the commander-in-chief or Steve Miller, we were confronted with a something that we had not seen in decades. People who were open and notorious with their supremacy ideology. And as a result of that, we see government breakdown, people get killed, insurrections at the Capitol, all of these things happen. So we were in a different posture. Now with this posture, it gives us an opportunity to actually restore some of the things that were destroyed as we begin to advocate for the things that should have been in place in the first place.
Yeah, Mr. President, over the weekend, I spoke to the Freedom Front Donor in St. Angelo branch in Texas, and I got a chance to speak to Brother Bledsoe, who's Texas conference president. But the reason why I'm bringing this up, voter suppression at the state level. These states, Texas, Florida, Georgia, and other states are passing all these rules to suppress the vote. You know, in the last election, we had one of the largest voter turnout in American history. You would think people would celebrate democracy by making it more available for people to vote. But the reaction also now is to, in a lot of these states. So tell us what the NAACP strategy is to try to respond and try to make sure that people don't lose their voting rights in the next election.
You know, you mentioned Gary Bledsoe. We are prepared to file a lawsuit in Texas. I see it coming any day now. He's a strong advocate. We filed a lawsuit in Georgia, in Florida. It's whack-a-mole. We're running around the country filing lawsuits to protect our right to vote. But this is a nation that must decide whether or not we're going to be a democratic nation or a white supremacist nation. And those two things are inconsistent with one another. Because white supremacy wants democracy in a box, limited to only those who fit a certain criteria. That's why when the nation was founded, voting was for white men, landowners only, and the definition of white is not the same definition that we know as we know it now. Because if you use Italian, Jewish, Polish, any of those European countries, you were not considered white. Only if you was a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. So that social construct of race evolves based on who wants to maintain power, domination, and control. We are at a space now where that's not acceptable. You cannot sell this dream of a democracy, but then exclude who could participate, who cannot, while at the exact same time have a social contract called the Constitution, saying that these people, everyone is entitled if you fit the criteria, like being born in this country, and yet you don't want to honor that contract. These things are inconsistent. White supremacy and democracy cannot exist together. That's why we're seeing the level of anxiety in some of the white community, because our participation threatens their standing and really knock down this notion of a supremacist race.
Yes. And Stacy, just one little side point. Earlier, a few shows ago, Mr. President, the head of the Children's Defense Fund gave us some startling information. I didn't know that right now in the United States Census, even though they undercounted us in the 2020 census, data is coming in to show that the majority of children, or the majority of people in the United States under the age of 18 are already children of color. And so for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, it looks like demographically, you're going to have a growing base of new members joining the NAACP because people of color are expanding. And I think one of the reasons why we have this reaction of the white supremacists, they realize that demographically, their time is up.
But we have to be clear, demographic our destiny, so we're going to have to fight, we're going to have to protect, and we're going to have to advance.
Yes.
We've got to fight for our positioning under this social contract, the Constitution, so that everything that we're entitled to, we receive. As African Americans, far too long we have been treated in a posture where we've seen ourselves as victims of government as opposed to owners of government. Our tax dollars, our labor created what we know as this nation. Yes. And so we have to take that ownership right. But once we take it, we got to protect it. And we got to protect it by making sure we're advancing our opportunities to be as inclusive of those in our community as possible. You know, we don't want to fall into a trap where only a certain privilege of us get the advantages and everybody else left behind. We have to advance for everyone, but respect the social contract so that all communities can benefit. Even in the South, majority of those who are under the age of 18 are from communities of color. In a state like Mississippi, you're talking about majority of the kids under 18 are Black.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Dr. Chavis, along those lines, you're talking about young people. We got a question from James Wright for you, President Johnson. He asks, why should young people join the NAACP?
Well, we are the largest organization of youth advocates in the country, bar none. And we've been there for a while. And so young people engage in our youth councils or our college chapters or AXO for multiple reasons. For some of them, they want to display their academic excellence through our AXO competition. For others, the youth councils, they are part of our training ground of young people becoming strong advocates. And our college division, many of the folks that you see identified as Black Lives Matter are also NAACP officers. You think about in Minneapolis, the young sister there who's now the branch president is 26. She started off as a college advocate. Her predecessor was 30. She started off as a college advocate of the NAACP. But when you see the young people in the street, you see young, energetic Black folks who the media define to be a part of this group or that group. I have never been one for organizational supremacy. I've always said that if you're advocating for the rights of our people and their freedom, what vehicle you choose is irrelevant. It is important that we allow them, young people, to have a voice, and it's our role to protect that voice. The continuity of our communities, civil rights movement, is about the energy of our young people, the wisdom of our elder, and the connective tissue of those who are in between age. And we could never put ourselves in this posture of a us versus us, whether it's by generation or organization.
Well, we could talk to the president all day, Dr. Chavis. I'm going to give you your closing thoughts with President Johnson.
Well, I'm glad that Brother Wright asked that question. I appreciate and support the response from the NAACP president, Derrick Johnson. We both grew up in the NAACP. I started out as a youth. He started out as a youth. I would not be where I am today if it had not been for the NAACP. And I'm sure that Derrick would say the same thing. I would just say on behalf of the Black Press of America, we salute our nation's oldest, our largest, our boldest civil rights organization, the NAACP.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much again, President Derrick Johnson. Don't forget, and Derrick Johnson mentioned NAACP convention is in July, NAACP.org. You can go to the website and find out more about how to register there. But the NPA's annual summer convention is also coming up. It's June 23rd to June 26th, and you can register today at www.virtualnnpa2021.com. It's totally free. Thanks to our president and CEO, Dr. Chavis, our chair, Karen Carter-Richards, the executive committee, the executive administrator of the NNPA, Claudette Perry. They've all worked together to make this a great experience for everyone and to keep it free of charge. Let it be known, remember this, courage is one step ahead of fear. And don't forget, this weekend and every Sunday, watch the Chavis Chronicles on PBS TV and PBS World. Have a great weekend. Stay safe. Wear a mask. We're appropriate. And come back on Monday and be safe.